from being one of the largest arms importer to one of the biggest indigenous defense powerhouse. All of a sudden, India is making one of the most efficient war machines on earth. 70 years of independence, one of the largest economies, largest population, situated in one of the most intense geopolitical zones, and thousands of years of civilizations. Yet, to protect the nation from the attacks, India did not produce weapons and equipment of our own. Everything essential was imported. The public sector defense industries existed, but for nothing. This was the standard picture which you all have heard for all these decades. But something really strange is happening in silence, and the new reality will force you to change everything you know about the India's indigenous defense technology. It is time to realize that India is becoming a new leader, a global powerhouse in the market, a giant in the making. In this video, we will divide the whole thing into 3 parts. How did India achieve this impossible change? What prevented this to happen all these years? And what is the roadmap to ultimate supremacy alongside the global giants? Do you know that for years, the world mocked us, that we couldn't manufacture our own defense equipment and we had to pay exorbitant prices to get even the basic goods? It is not that we didn't have plans. We in fact initiated some of the best possible plans, but all were stalled. We had developed fighter jet Marut in 1960s, but project stalled. Then later the Kaveri engine, yet it never saw the light. Then something shifted. It was Make in India tag when Narendra Modi came to power and initiated this umbrella strategy. Though it was for every other sector but for defense, it was the primary base of the strategy shift to turn India from a buyer to a builder for complete reliance and results. Our systems worked round the clock in a circular loop structure. Soldiers, Air Force pilots, and field officers shared their operational feedbacks. Scientists at DRDO turned those into design feedbacks. All this was possible because there was a massive upscaling in defense spending for R&D, design and procurement. But in modern form of warfare, whether seen in Operation Sindoor or Operation Rising Lion in Iran and Israel, the major conflict was aerial, non-contact and high precision. Like when Noor Khan Air Base was decimated, it had a 3.5 meter thick reinforced concrete covering. But Brahmos missiles penetrated the underground chambers in supersonic speed from 600 km aerial distance through a small ventilation outlet. This established the performance of India's homegrown missiles and elevated India as a real missile superpower. This whole execution was possible because of the parallel rise of India's space technology, indigenous Scramjet and Ramjet engines, supersonic to hypersonic propulsion, own NAVIC as navigation, all developed under the joint expertise of DRDO and ISRO. How do you substantiate all these tall claims in real-time example? Well, let's look at the curious case of Russian S-400. Do you know how many countries use it? Around 6. And how many nations have seen 100% wartime success? It is only India. Russian air defense failed miserably in Iran, Syria and the Ukraine war. Turkey and China too had S-400 and they are all direct allies of Pakistan. So in Operation Sindoor, it is a fact. Pakistan used Chinese or the Turkish war maneuvers but could not break through India's S-400 because we didn't just plug and play, we rewired it, retested it, re-aimed it, integrated it with Indian satellites, sensors and our own proprietary technologies. What failed even in Russia-Ukraine war worked flawlessly in Operation Sindoor. The world thought India was a soft power, but in silence, it was building something harder, sharper and faster. The actual reasons are quite complex and rather surprising. At the very first, we did not care much to have a philosophy of military dominance. We rather carried an obscure, feeble policy of peacemaking, which actually weakened the morale of the forces. Unlike Operation Sindoor, the government back then did nothing after the dastardly attacks on Mumbai 26/11, despite Indian Air Force being ready to strike deep inside Pakistan in 2008. It was strategic ambiguity, absence of any prominent defense doctrine. Everything was just reactive, no such vision, just survive the crisis. And in absence of a national strategy of military self-reliance, our defense hardware was based on just two fulcrums. One, a defunct public sector buried under the bureaucratic hurdles, red tapes, lethargy, and inefficiency. Two, over-reliance on the Soviet-era planes, tanks, and missiles. This made our defense industry just a licensed manufacturer than original creators. You won't believe, until 2001, India's top private sectors were not even allowed in the defense production. Forget the startups. Such was the policy. No Tatas, no L&Ts, no startups. That is, no innovation, no disruptive thinking, only public sector licensed manufacturing. As there was no private sector, R&D did not happen, funds were cut down, everything was a state secrecy. Just imagine, we had made the bomb, but we could not build a world-class rifle. This was the illusion of nuclear deterrence. We adopted a blindfolded peacetime mindset in a warlike neighborhood.
In audio.
After the remarkable precision and success of Operation Sindoor, a real-time kinetic military action, let's imagine India has reached a position of X in defense power and technology curve. This X position includes all the developments in missiles like the second generation Brahmos, a Mach 8 speed and 1000-kilometer range, the complete air defense mechanism, which includes modified Russian S-400s, in combination with India's own Prithvi, Akashtir, LR SAMs, Barak 8, Project Kusha, integrating with Rafale and Sukhoi jets, with indigenous technologies of navigation, missiles, power pack, and involving the private sector players like the Tatas, Mahindras, L&T, Adani to build advanced hardware, or companies like Kalyani Bharat Forge building artilleries and high-end assault rifles, or using India's IT prowess to develop software to power and control the advanced hardware. And finally, integrating everything with the decades of wartime learnings and experiences of India's armed forces. This gets completed in a package of, let's assume, X. But the current demand is not just X, but X plus Y. This Y is the gap, considered from the mean of the best of the global counterparts in all the verticals of defense tech and capability. X plus Y is the benchmark that India must reach to be truly considered as an optimum military superpower. But in reality, the transition from X to Y will take certain time. Even after the fast tracking of upgrades, production and procurement, because there are some severe roadblocks, power games, geopolitical tussles, which will try to prevent India from reaching the optimum. The best example is the present roadblock India is facing from the American giant GE for the Tejas engine. Getting back to the reality, as the time to overcome the roadblocks will pass, India cannot just stop at the predetermined Y, because by that time, the mean Y will shift upwards as the global counterparts would have advanced in their own technologies. So take that extra growth as Z. Therefore, for India to really become the best, it needs to make it as X plus Y plus Z. And this is not possible if it follows a simple linear path, as the benchmark will always keep shifting upwards. To beat the race, we need to take a non-linear approach. What is that approach? Let us focus on this technology curve showing nations which are related with India. The x-axis is the time of maturity of development and y-axis is the performance indicator. Let us look at the relative position of the nations with respect to time spent and performance of the technology and hardware. With respect to US, Russia, France, China and Israel, India is relatively a new entrant in manufacturing top-notch indigenous war machines. As said before, if India wants to take a linear path of growth, it will never be possible to reach the top position. Rather, what is needed is a non-linear, strategic and pragmatic approach with each of these nations alongside investing in its own innovations and R&D. Combination of all these factors plus timely execution is what that is needed. But this can happen only when the following is maintained. 1. Scrapping out Babudom or the bureaucratic deadlocks. 2. Non-discrimination of the private sector and startup talent. 3. Government acting as the VCs for financial backups. 4. Knowledge churning right from the college level to build the right talent force. Defense technology is a carry-forward process. It cannot happen indigenously in one day. India at present cannot match or replace the tech of US or Russia, but all these years the knowledge was just stagnant and it has just started to move. Just as an immediate business opportunity, Indian hardware can find great application in the second-tier defense markets, where the nations would just get world-class war machines at a fraction of the cost. This way, the cash flows will roll off and the compounding machinery for the industry will start.